because I want to let the live breathe and um, and just kind of have that that reset kind of phase or whatever. So allowing the space and the ethers and the air and the young minds or the new minds here, old body, young body, to just allow a subtle transformation to be received of positiveness. So with these lives, before I even start doing what I'm gonna do, and what I'm gonna do is just read a book and just kind of reflect on a book. And the chapter I'm gonna pick is based on how the moon is traveling from Cap to Cancer, right? So within that, the moon gonna be drifting into aqua mode. So the aqua mode is that depending on where aqua is in your house, the life force, the spirit of the sun is infusing itself with the constellation, and that spirit of the sun, the soul taking physical form and physical ego consciousness, that spirit of the sun will play out in one of your houses, right? So, um, Aquarius being in the moon right now, I might just go to chapter 11 because I'm gonna read a book, right? Um, so I'm gonna read the book Outwitting the Devil, um, by Napoleon Hill. Um, and the point of me doing this is to just kind of just to kind of further kind of progress, truth, you know, um, further progress, my own momentum and consistency intellectually, right? Because the momentum is subjective per your unique human, the human being made up of we all use the intellect differently, or we don't, or we have a lack of the use of the modern intellect, and the modern intellect is not everybody's necessarily voting for that, and I'm not against anything, but like if you waste time, then you could shy away from that intellect, right? So this is me progressing through the momentum of the intellect as I have been doing for a real positive collective timeline, which these new agers say that's the mission, but they could be like wish-washy with it for whatever reason. Yeah, so the point of this shit, oh fuck, I almost flipped the book. So the point of this book, the point of so like within this live stream, this yada yada yada, I want to invite a subtle transformation energy of pausing, a pause energy, a reset energy, and that pause energy and that reset energy where we find ourselves seeing how we could choose to tune into this. Like if anybody's tuning into my shit, that's your mother flipping choice. So it's like you have like no reason to even complain. I have a nuanced complaint. So now I'm getting more detailed with it, right? So you shouldn't have a nuanced complaint if you're trying to find something bad about this stuff when it's not all that bad, when the intention is a balanced approach. And within that balanced approach, positive stuff comes out. And the positive stuff that comes out, it's not just fleeting, temporary, pass me by, get high, fucking metaphorical, get high type of shit, right? No, within my intellectual momentum, respectively, the approach and the intention I'm bringing is aiming for a positivity that's not necessarily temporal, right? It's a positivity that is beyond like the mortal positivity, respectively. And what does that mean? The intention here is to have a reset energy to invite the subtle transformation for you to possibly reach a new positivity. Recognize you're making the choice to show up here. So any bad ridden thoughts and approaches and attitudes and emotions that you have, I'm all the religions. I see all the religions in balance. Anything that you have as an approach to view my content, that's your choice. So in the background, quote unquote, maybe some proxy CIA field group, right? They could have their own experiment testimonies, however the fuck they do, respectively, right? And there could be just toxic profiles, respectively, in the mass of it, in positions that could just be profiling some shit. But guess what? That's your choice to approach that attitude of that job. That's your choice to approach it like that. That's your approach to have that lifestyle, right? So people in the CIA, possibly, they could be having a toxic reaction, a toxic outlook, and a toxic outcome for some reason, because that's what they're choosing. And they're choosing to like have this case, they're choosing to have this job, and they're choosing to have that reaction. And if you're choosing that energetic variable of some type of negativity in the mature spiritual world, that's your responsibility. And for you to project your lack of responsibility onto me, that's a subtle breaking of an energetic law, because you're not taking care of your own allotment of thoughts and feelings, right? Respectively and just generally, right? So so uh so so I'm gonna read a book, and I'm just gonna read a book, and like in the future, I'm just gonna it's just some type of it's some type of progressing momentum. What does the progressing momentum mean? We work with what we have right now, right? Because obviously in the future I could like you know you know I don't necessarily always get personal on these lives, but in November of 2025 I moved cities, and as I moved cities, I had I for some reason I just had a different like I just had a different like I just had a different arrangement pretty much. And within that arrangement, after the accident, I had to come back here, and now I'm just doing a different mission to like kind of get back certain stuff, so I could actually like you know uh come on this YouTube live stream more professionally. When I say, and in the last recent lives, when I say like I've been doing this professionally for the last 10 years, I'm saying it on an energetic quality presentation, not necessarily the surface level, tangible, so approach. So it's a context thing. So I'm just going to read this book, and in the future, after this live, when I do lives in the future, like I could reflect on the book more quality, like where I could also like kind of like do songs around it, right? More or less. But I'm not gonna get too heady. I just want to read the. I just want to. I'm just gonna read chapter 11. So this is not necessarily a Q&A. Um, I'm not necessarily gonna do the off the cuff astrology reads. I'll save that for later. I'm not necessarily gonna do the off. I'm not gonna necessarily like be ranty. I'm just gonna read a book. That's all I'm gonna do. So as I read this book, I'm putting it on myself to have a focus where I'm gonna focus, and I'm not gonna be ranty about my life, what I could do, should do, etc. Or um or freestyle, but I might freestyle. So I'm going to chapter 11 from Outwitting the Devil, and chapter 11 is called Learning from Adversity. And as I read this and I chose chapter 11 because Aquarius is the 11th house. So you could say we're in the sun, you know, um, in the feminine aspect, in the pooling aspect of the feminine shadow self. Aquarius is in the 11th house right now, respectively. So within that 11th house, I chose the 11th chapter. I'm gonna read this chapter. I'm gonna try to not get distracted, and I'm gonna see if I could just pull through reading the whole chapter without getting distracted. And then after, I'm gonna reflect on the book. So it's page 202 to page 218. Chapter 12 is, I already mentioned chapter 12 in a recent live. So here I'm gonna go for it. I'm just gonna go for it. So if you're barely coming into the live from whatever junction, district, or faction you're coming in, junction, district, or faction, original open source, then feel free to pause. Feel free to invite reset energies. Feel free to set an intention for blissful balance and positivity and transformative, you know, positive beneficial outcomes. So now I'm going to start reading the book. And obviously my voice changes because I believe the placement of the anatomy and the intention and the flow and the mood, there's all these different factors that within the air calibration of the metaphysical aerodynamical vehicle of the fleshly suit, then within the different pressures of the energetic temperaments, then I believe that's what kind of dictates how the voice comes out, right? Huh. But people, people are kind of like, people have different taboo approaches because there's a lack of like someone to hold their hand spiritually to kind of talk about the uncomfortable things they want to talk about. People don't want to talk about the uncomfortable things they don't want to talk about because they don't have a hand to hold spiritually speaking, right? So since you don't have a hand to hold spiritually speaking, you're avoiding talking about the uncomforting things because there's simply a lack of guidance in the nearby vicinity of the circumstance and the nearby vicinity of the planet Earth, respectively. So I just kind of I talk like for some reason I'm fucking geared to just intellectually see it all, and that's cool if someone wants to compare with me and analyze me and say I can't do this or whatever. Yeah, I'm on my own fucking lane entirely. Then that's for you to catch up with your lack of intelligentness and your lack of recognition of intellectual contribution, which helps the fucking mission in itself. So what I'm doing here is I'm gonna read a book. So chapter 11, learning from adversity. It's good to lighten things up, right? Because obviously you never know what crowd in the future or right now could be viewing in. Obviously, like, there could be children viewing for some reason. There could be children here attracted to the message, right? And it's up to, you know, graceful, balanced curators to edit it accordingly, right? So obviously, like fucking 1995, if someone cusses, then it's up to the editor in the background to do their fucking job and bleep it every time I cuss. So it's not that big of a deal that you can't fix it, right? And I understand if I'm cussing, it kind of shapes, the viewer audience in who could be like who could qualify or who could choose their own attraction to come be qualified here, right? So I don't mean to be too rambly or ranty, but the key here is like to have some type of acknowledgement in what is possible, right? On some 2012 shit or whatever. So now I'm going to read the book. And let me take my own advice. Let me take it upon myself to just start with, this unique moment of gratitude. Because even though we could be on that gratitude, life and its challenges could shake us off the gratitude. Seriously though, like seriously, we could like be shaken out of the gratitude, right? So how do we stay in the gratitude? It's 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 being in the mode of not of being more of like not super active, right? Because if you're in a super active mode, like you're running or sprinting, you're in a whole different mode where you're not in a contemplative, pensive mode to kind of be contemplative and kind of like be one with your own settling, wild nature of how your mind goes through different moods and natures and behaviors, right? So the mind is going through different natures and behaviors because of the different moods and modes it's going through, right? So it's not for me to say like always be in gratitude, always do this. No, I'm saying when you get a chance, when you're in when God gives you the homeostasis to be in a settled natural mood, you could practice gratitude. You could remember to practice gratitude by gentle reminders of doing that, because within going to different moods, we could forget what to practice within the gratitude of being at peace and settled, right? So, excuse that rant. Now I'm going to start reading the book. And it's page 202 to 218, so 17 pages. So hopefully I could read this. Maybe I'll read it fast. Maybe I'll do the speed read technique. So let me take a breath. So the chapter of this book is called, and I might just put this private because this rant was it was kind of weird. So chapter 11, Learning from Adversity by Napoleon Hill, Outwitting the Devil. Here we go. And and I'm just gonna go for it now. Is failure ever a benefit to man? Yes, indeed. Learning from adversity is the third of the seven principles, but few people know that every adversity brings with it the seed of an equivalent advantage. Still, fewer people know the difference between temporary defeat and failure. If this knowledge were generally known, I would be deprived of one of my strongest weapons of control over human beings. But I understand you to say that failure is one of your greatest allies. I got the impression from your confession that failure causes people to lose ambition and quit trying, and then you take them over without opposition on their part. That is just the point. I take them over after they quit trying. If they knew the difference between temporary defeat and failure, they would not quit when they meet with opposition from life. If they knew that every form of defeat and all failures bring with them the seed of unborn opportunity, they would keep on fighting and win. Success usually is but one of short step beyond the point where one quits fighting. Is that all one might learn from adversity, defeat, and failure? No, that is the least of what one might learn. I hate to tell you this, but failure often serves as a blessing in disguise because it breaks the grip of hypnotic rhythm and frees the mind for a fresh start. Now we are getting somewhere. So you have confessed at long last that even nature's law of hypnotic rhythm can be and often is annulled by nature herself. Is that correct? No, that is not. Okay. No, that is not stating the matter accurately. Nature never reverses any of her natural laws. Nature does not take away a human being's freedom of thought through hypnotic rhythm. The individual gives up his freedom by abuse of this law. If a man jumped from a tree and was killed by the sudden impact of his body with the earth through the law of gravity, you wouldn't say nature murdered him, would you? You would say the man neglected to relate himself properly to the law of gravity. Wow, that's powerful because that's a metaphor within how we're relating ourselves properly to other laws of life and nature. So it's as if the laws of nature, they're consuming us based on our lack of awareness of them. I am beginning to see the law of hypnotic rhythm is capable of both negative and positive application. It may drag one down to slavery through loss of the privilege of freedom of thought, or it may help one rise to great heights of achievement through the free use of thought, depending on how the individual relates himself to the law. Is that correct? Now you have it right. But what about failure? One does not fail intentionally, with purpose aforethought. No one encourages temporary defeat. These are circumstances over which the individual often has no control whatsoever. How then can it be said that nature does not take away one's freedom of thought when failure destroys ambition, willpower, and the self confidence essential to make a fresh start? Failure is a man made circumstance. It is never real until it has been accepted by man as permanent. Stating it another way, failure is a state of mind. Therefore, it is something an individual can control until he neglects to exercise this privilege. Nature does not force people to fail, but nature does impose her law of hypnotic rhythm upon all minds, and through this law gives permanency to the thoughts which dominate those minds. Accumulated habitual mind patterns in my respective translation, right? Underground, 10 years. In other words, failure thoughts are taken over by the law of hypnotic rhythm and made permanent if the individual accepts any circumstances as being permanent failure. That same law just as readily takes over and makes permanent thoughts of success. Failure is a state of mind, therefore, it is something an individual can control until he neglects to exercise this privilege. Can this be true? Has Hill convinced you that failure is a man made circumstance? I believe he makes a compelling case. If I look closely at my life, my own successes and failures in business, mistakes, and missteps, could I claim that anyone is responsible other than myself? Will a personal inventory of your life yield different results? Hill has helped me place a different value on failure than I did in the past. What part then does failure play in helping an individual break the grip of hypnotic rhythm after the law has been fastened upon his mind? Failure brings a climax in which one has the privilege of clearing his mind of fear and making a new start in another direction. Failure proves conclusively that something is wrong with one's aims or the plans by which the object of these aims is sought. Failure is the dead end of the habit path one has been following. And when it is reached, it forces one to leave that path and take up another, thereby creating a entirely new rhythm. But failure does more than this. It gives an individual an opportunity to test himself, wherein he may learn how much willpower he possesses. Failure also forces people to learn many truths they would never discover without it. Failure often leads an individual to an understanding of the power of self discipline, without which no one could turn back after having once been the victim of hypnotic rhythm. Study the lives of all people who achieve outstanding success in any calling and observe, with profit, that their success is usually an exact ratio to their experiences of defeat before succeeding. Failure brings a climax in which one has the privilege of clearing his mind of fear and making a new start in another direction. So he re-emphasized that quote, and that's funny because I was gonna repeat that quote, and they already did. They repeated that quote within just how they formatted the book. So obviously, there's creative ways to format the book, whether the new innovation of book technology will recognize how things have already been done, and they're just kind of rehashing it. Either way, it's cool that there is a creative way to format a book, such as repeating a, a significant quote. So look how the book is formatted, guys. So it's like we don't like there's not so what people in general industries have to realize there's not such a strict way of doing things because we're like if we're creative, we can't have too much creativity without structure, but we can't have too much structure without creativity because then the structure is just dry, right? It's overly dry. So there has to be some type of respective approach of a creative balance, right? Respectively. Is this all you have to say of the advantages of failure? No, I have barely begun. If you want the real significance of adversity, failure, defeat, and all other experiences which break up a human being's habits and force him to form new habits, watch nature at her work. Nature uses illness to break the physical rhythm of the body when the cells and organs become improperly related. She uses economic depressions to break the rhythm of mass thought when great numbers of people become improperly related through business, social, and political activities. Does that sound familiar, Cali, India? And she uses failure to break the rhythm. Like y'all pointing fingers, y'all don't even know who y'all pointing fingers at. And she uses failure to break the rhythm of negative thought when an individual becomes improperly related to himself in his own mind. Observe carefully, and you will see that everywhere in nature there is always at work a natural law which gives eternal change to all matter, all energy, and to the power of thought. The only permanent thing in the universes is change, eternal, inexorable change, through which every atom of matter and every unit of energy has the opportunity to properly relate itself to all other units of matter and energy, and every human being has the opportunity and the privilege of properly relating himself to all other human beings, no matter how many mistakes he makes or how many times or in what ways he may have been defeated. So, I don't want to be too hogwashy or too watered down with the saying that, quote unquote, everything has already been done. But that last paragraph is a prime example of how, quote unquote, everything has already been done. Let me repeat that paragraph. Eternal, inexorable change through which every atom of matter and every unit of energy has the opportunity to properly relate itself to all other units of matter and energy. So this book was written, I believe, in the early 1900s. So we could see people catch that wind of a trend, of an intellectual trend of that similar meaning. So it's like, what is original? Like, right? Like, what is original when we find someone has done it earlier than what you're doing? So that's why the copyright system, respectively, could be aloof. Why? Because you're trying to copyright something that someone has already did, and many other literature-like cases that they have done somewhere else, and now you're trying to repurpose and rehash and re-solicit something that you don't own dual fold. How you don't own it dual fold? It's already been done, one, and two, you don't own the fucking English language. So in dual fold, we could see respectively how for good and for bad energetically how the copyright industry is being transformed. How is it being transformed? By the general natural energies of reflecting what has been, what is, and what will be. And two, how it's just how there's just different types of inaccurate distortion approaches or inaccurate approaches to claim something someone else has done before you, right? So I'm trying to explain respectively how the quote unquote copyright industry, how there's a nuance of transformation, right? And if you don't have the intellectualness to see that standardly, and I'm not saying in or out of the courts, I don't really give a fuck if it's in or out of the courts. I'm just saying the standardness of it. That's what it is, right? I don't have your guys' human fear. I don't have your guys' mortal discomfort, right? I'm just saying things as they are. And I'm gonna keep saying things as they are. And if you want to be discomforted by the truth, that's your subjective human growth, right? Like I have no problem saying the deeper truth of things, right? Because obviously some other human could have it in their recollection of the mind of this can be taken to court generally, right? Of course someone would have that proposition, right? I'm not saying I'm going to initiate that. I'm saying someone else could think that. And if someone were to try to bring me into that generally, then by no choice I would explain the deeper truth. Duh. And then we would see, and then hopefully there would be a deeper truth council that could not only acknowledge the truth of that, but verify it with supposedly the advancement of whatever the fuck your, you know, aloof fabricated hype of your AI has, right? And it doesn't know what's guiding it to harmony, right? So it has nothing to do with your replicated, you know, baby snatcher fucking approach of artificial intelligence. It doesn't have that baby snatcher approach. It doesn't have that inaccurate approach. And since it's inaccurate, that's why your AI will lose because you have a lack and an opposition of original, authentic, maximum accuracy. That's why your AI will lose for the fucking millionth time for the 10-year underground current. So when mass failure overtakes a nation, such as the 1929 World Business Depression, the circumstance is in perfect harmony with nature's plan to break up man's habits and give out fresh opportunities. The beauty of publishing this book now during the current economic turmoil is that nature is once again breaking up man's habits and presenting fresh opportunities. And obviously, it's up to us whether we want to inquire and question what the entity of nature is, right? Because obviously, it's like nature's doing this. Okay, who's nature, right? Who's this, right? Who's taking crumbs here and there and making hit songs and just and the research has been shown on how that song was made. You know, I'm just saying it generally. What you are saying intrigues me. Am I to understand that hypnotic rhythm has something to do with the way people relate themselves to one another? That abstract, elusive thing called character is nothing but a manifestation of the law of hypnotic rhythm. Therefore, when speaking of one's character, it would be proper to say his thought habits have been crystallized into a positive or a negative personality through hypnotic rhythm. One is good or bad because of the knitting together of his thoughts and deeds through hypnotic rhythm. One is bound by poverty or blessed with abundance because his aims, plans, and desires, or lack of them, have been made permanent and real by hypnotic rhythm. Is that all you have to say of the connection between hypnotic rhythm and human relationships? No, I have just begun. Remember, while I am talking, I am speaking of the influence of hypnotic rhythm in connection with all human relationships. Men who succeed in business do so entirely because of the way they relate themselves to their associates and to others outside of the business. So the relationship game. That's like low key, low key, low key. That might be like the toughest challenge because the human beings they're so like stubborn respectively. They want it their way or the highway, and that's just not good, not bad. That's just the psychology of the shit, right? And then the dark psychology is what they do within the agendas in the shadows, right? So the general dark psychology is what they're doing with the human stubbornness and how they're using their quote unquote negative human emotions for distorted agendas to put it accurately, right? So that would be the general dark psychology, right? So so the relationships, that's one of the toughest challenges. Professional men who succeed do so largely because of the manner in which they relate themselves to their clients, right? So what makes it so clients could come to you, right? Well, I think esoterically it's the karma thing, right? And there's a lot of nuanced karma in the way, and that karma has some type of esoteric layer, some esoteric fog layer, and deception has esoteric fog layer. So karma and deception, it's a negative layer in which a quote unquote respectively generally a narcissist could use deception and and some type of and some type of general karma as some type of barrier to kind of skew you from the truth of who you are and what you are generally, right? So professional men succeed do so largely because of the manner in which they relate themselves to their clients. So what makes it so you get the clients that you get? It's the karma that you have based on the current past Kali Yuga collective karma fates and how you have a contract with the main fucking archon from the past, and that main archon you have a soul contract, a surface level contract with them, and now you're at ease to be at material abundance, right? Based on the past contracts, right? Advanced esoteric soul contracts, and now and seeing how that game is changing of how deception won't always work in the new age, right? And nature being some type of proxy, quote unquote, neutralness to the deception and the positive wisdom of the Tao that overcomes the deception and the distortion. You know, authentic India has some type of non-duality that could hopefully shed some light on the positive side of the Tao of the China, right? Respectively, right? It is much more important for the lawyer to know people and to know the laws of nature than it is to know the law. So the lawyer needs to know people, the way people are, maybe, maybe not, make it personal, understand where they're coming from, get a more soulful approach, and to know the laws of nature, whatever that means, than it is to know the law itself, because people, relationship dynamics, and the law of nature predate Saturnalia law in the surface level matrix. So, at the international courts somewhere in the fucking future, this simple 1906 book of Napoleon Hill could see the soulful approach and where your law is distorted on the international level. So you want to fucking have a snap criticism fucking discussion and decision about my surface level shit, and you have no idea of the depthfulness of raw truth and spiritual, I don't want to say protection, but spiritual presence of nature's law that there is. So there's a flaw in your guys' intelligence, and since there's a flaw in the intelligence predates the way of life. And I'm not trying to cap on anybody. It just is what it is, right? I'm not saying your way of life is wrong, but if you guys are killing each other over like inaccurate reason, distorted reason wars, then that could be a fault in the way of life, possibly, right? So the doctor is a failure before he starts unless he knows how to relate himself to his patients so as to establish their faith in him. So y'all know it. Y'all know it. Marriage succeeds or fails entirely because of the manner in which the participants relate themselves to one another. Proper relationship in marriage begins with the proper motive for the marriage. Marriage succeeds or fails entirely because of the manner in which the participants relate themselves to one another. That sounds pretty basic. Proper relationship in marriage begins with the proper motive for the marriage. So there's motives. The human beings have motives. The human beings that are away from God have motives without God. So, and I'm not trying to cap the shadow side of the Saturnalia. I'm just trying to say what it is, and I know a lot of people are going to get pressed from this advanced esoteric intelligence. And for me to be graceful with the balance to facilitate that, someone could say I'm full of shit. You're new to this shit, buddy. You're new to this shit, buddy Supreme. Take a breath, slow down, relax. And the doctor is a failure before he starts unless he knows how to relate himself to his patients so as to establish their faith in him. So, marriage succeeds or fails entirely because of. Oh, wait, okay. Most marriages do not bring happiness because the contracting parties neither understand nor attempt to understand the law of hypnotic rhythm, through the operation of which every word they speak, every act in which they engage, and every motive by which they are inspired to deal with each other is picked up into a web that entangles them in controversial misery or gives to them the wings of freedom through which they soar above all forms of unhappiness. So marriage could either propel you or not propel you. I'm not saying marriage, I'm not for or against marriage. I'm just saying people could be against marriage because the way they're being contracted or forced by their family make it so their spirit could rebel against the marriage, right? So I'm not for or against marriage. It's not what you do, it's how you do it, right? 2017 shit. So it's that people could have like a forced contract within marriage and it's not what they want. So now their spirit will rebel against marriage when a part of them could just not when a part of them could think otherwise, right? To put it gracefully. Every newly made acquaintanceship between people ripens into friendship and then into spiritual harmony, sometimes called love, or plants a germ of suspicion and doubt which evolves and grows into open rebellion. According to the way in which the participants in the acquaintanceship relate themselves to one another, hypnotic rhythm picks up the dominating motives, aims, purposes, and feelings of the contacting minds and weaves these into some degree of faith or fear, love or hatred. After the pattern has taken definite shape, as it does with time, it is forced upon the contracting minds and made a part thereof. In this silent way does nature make permanent the dominating factors of every human relationship. In every human relationship, the evil motives and the evil deeds of the contracting individuals are coordinated and consolidated into definite form and subtly woven into that all important human trait known as caricature. In the same manner, the motives and the deeds of good are consolidated and forced upon the individual. You see, therefore, it is not only one's deeds, but also one's very thoughts which determine the nature of all human relationships. So, the state of your mind is why you have the relationships that you have, because that's what you have the capacity to resonate with, right? So, quote unquote, God's, I guess God's, select children energetically that he, you know, endows them with the intelligence to see the difference between some type of being of distortion and some type of non-being distortion, aka quote unquote chosen ones, which I don't really use that term, but I'll explain it just for this meaning or adage or whatever. You see, therefore, it is not only one's deeds, but also one's very thoughts which determine the nature of all human relationships. So the state of your mind is what you resonate, attract to have a human relationship that you could have. Are they on the same mental playing field as you or not? If they're not, the relationship won't work. There's no like-mindedness. You are leading into pretty deep water. And this is beyond, whatever fucking public speaking shit y'all fuckers have, because underground, I'm like, it's 10 years on this shit, guys. 10th. You are leading into pretty deep water. Let's keep near the shore, where I could follow you without fear of getting beyond a safe depth. Go ahead and tell me how this subject of human relationships actually works in the current affairs of a problem filled with such as we have today. That is a happy thought, but let me make sure you understand the principles I am telling about before I try to show you how to apply them in the affairs of life. I wish to be sure you understand that the law of hypnotic rhythm is something that no one can control, influence, or evade, but everyone can relate himself to this law so as to benefit by its inexorable operation. Harmonious relationship with the law consists entirely of the individual changing his habits so they represent the circumstances and the things the individual wants and is willing to accept. No one could change the law of hypnotic rhythm any more than one could change the law of gravity, but everyone could change himself. Remember how you respond to the rhythm of nature and the matrix. Remember, so that I did a swift definition of hypnotic rhythm, the oscillating patterns of nature and the matrix, how we respond to those up and downs and what the new transformative results are thereof, right? So it's a swift definition of hypnotic rhythm. Obviously, you could define it, more, more MLG like, more Major League Gaming like, to put it metaphorically. Remember, therefore, in all the discussion of this subject, that all human relationships are made and maintained by the habits of the individuals related. No one could change the law of hypnotic rhythm any more than one could change the law of gravity, but everyone could change himself. Have you ever tried to change someone else and only been frustrated when you realized you were not in control and therefore not succeeding? The law of hypnotic rhythm plays only the part of solidifying the factors which constitute human relationships, but it does not create those factors. Before we go further with the discussion of human relationships, I want you to get a clear understanding of the subconscious mind. The term, quote unquote, subconscious mind represents a hypothetical physical organ which has no actual existence, a ghost organ, respectively, original open source. The mind of man consists of universal energy. The universal energy is in this hypothetical spiritual organ, and that universal energy in that spiritual organ is in some type of microcellular form of consciousness that harbors your original soul self and the relationship of all the other soul selves. And it's funny, in the underground, I also uniquely define the subconscious like no one else has in the underground episode too. Like literally, like literally, like, because like no one literally answers that precise question. Like what is the subconscious? Like in like literally in like 2018 ish, literally like I did it. I took it upon myself to have my own intellectual approach, and I answer these questions from my own intuition, from just like my own intuition, and I just did it. I just do it. Respectively. Some call it infinite intelligence. So here, that's a brief definition of the subconscious mind, right? Which the individual receives, appropriates, and organizes definite thought forms through the network of intricate physical apparatus known as the brain. Some type of background spiritual intelligence, right? These thought forms are replicas of various stimuli which reach the brain through the five commonly known physical senses and the sixth sense, which is not so well known. When any form of stimuli reaches the brain and takes the definite shape of thought, it is classified and stored away in a group of the brain cells known as the memory group. All thoughts of a similar nature are stored together so that the bringing forth of one leads to easy contact with all of its associates. The system is very similar to the modern office filing cabinet, and it is operated in a similar manner. So, like, as above, so below, in a different way, as within, as without, in a different way, right? Right, right. The thought impressions with which one mixes the greatest amount of emotion or feeling are the dominating factors of the brain because they are always near the surface, at the top of the filing system, so to speak. This is what your human is dealing with what it's focused on: soul karma, human challenges, where your emotions and mind have been bottled up to be engrossed within what you're focusing on, or what you have been drenched with the surface level epidemic of challenge, so to speak, where they spring into action voluntarily the moment an individual neglects to exercise self-discipline. And if the president of your nation has a shallow comprehension of what original perfect comparison is, and you guys don't have the intellectual capacity to understand that, then that's where the lack of your intelligence is, neutrally speaking. Like, y'all want to snap criticism me and think I'm this, that, and the third, and you don't have any backing evidence of how whatever you claim to say is a truth is a factual truth. If your fucking president of your nation can't comprehend original perfect comparison, then you could detect and see their lack of intelligence and their lack of emotional maturity, respectively, of where that could be found in their presidential campaign and candidacy, respectively. So if you can't comprehend that, that's okay. We're human. We have learning curves. Where did I leave off at? Oh jeez. Oh jeez. The thought
impressions with which one mixes the greatest. Okay, yeah, saw that. These emotion. Okay, I'll just start from there. The thought impressions with which one mixes the greatest amount of motion or feeling are the dominating factors of the brain because they are always near the surface, at the top of the filing system, so to speak, where they spring into action voluntarily. The moment an individual neglects to exercise self-discipline, these emotion-laden thoughts are so powerful they often cause an individual to rush into action and indulge in needs which have not been submitted to or approved by his reasoning faculty. These emotional outbursts usually destroy harmony in all human relationships. So obviously, like you got to get like people, me talking to me, like we all need therapy. You know, we all need that pill, right? We all need like because we have to regulate our emotions, right? We can't in professional human relationships. There can't be an outburst, right? These emotional outbursts usually destroy harmony in human relationships. So the relationships are messed up because the emotions are being used as some type of weapon. The brain often brings together combinations of emotional feelings so powerful they completely set aside the control of the reasoning faculty. On all such occasions, human relationships are apt to be lacking in harmony. Through the operation of the sixth sense, the brain of a human being may contact the filing cabinet of other brains and inspect at will whatever thought impressions are on file there. The condition under which one person may contact and inspect the filing cabinet of another person's brain is generally known as harmony. But you may better understand what is meant if I say brains attuned to the same rate of thought vibrations could easily and quickly exercise the privilege of entering and inspecting each other's filing cabinets of thoughts. In addition to receiving organized thoughts from the filing cabinets of other brains through the sixth sense, one can, through the same physical organ, contact and receive information from the universal storehouse known as infinite intelligence. And that form of psychic approach, that's its own practice, right? I think all information reaching one's brain through the sixth sense comes from sources not easily isolated or traced. Therefore, this sort of information is generally believed to come from one's subconscious mind. The sixth sense is the organ of the brain through which one receives all information, all knowledge, all thought impressions which do not come through one or more of the five physical senses. Now that you understand how the mind operates, you will more easily understand how and why people come to grief through improper human relationships. You will also understand how human relationship may be made to yield riches in their highest form, riches in material, mental, and spiritual estates. Moreover, you will understand there could never be happiness except through understanding and application of the right principles of human relationships. You will understand too that no individual is an entity unto himself. That completeness of mind can be attained only by harmony of purpose and deed between two or more minds. So finding the like-minded entity within relationships sees yourself going closer to God, perhaps. You will understand why every human being should, of his own choice, become his brother's keeper, in fact, as well as in theory, whatever that means. What you say may be true, but I still insist that you have me beyond safe depths of thought. Let us get back nearer to the shore where I could wade in familiar water. We shall go out into the deeper water after we learn to swim well. We started out to discuss the subject of how to profit by adversity, but it seems we have drifted somewhat afield from that subject. And this class session, it could be more educated and informative than whatever class that you could be taking, even in the universities, because there's a spiritual frequency that has intelligence and has other, relationship harmonic based approaches in the working. where it's more like it's just a different it's just a more it's just a different spiritual package, right? So this class that I'm doing, it's probably more informative and educationist within in between the spiritual lines than your best fucking university class. And y'all could try to fucking, just, try to hack the copyright system and the law system however you will, right? Respectively within inquiring why the fuck do we even have the laws that we have? Like why like so put it on that first step right there. Like why the fuck do we have those laws that we have? Like bring it to that shit. So now I'm gonna go. What you said. We started out to discuss the subject of how to profit by adversity, but it seems we have drifted somewhat afield from that subject. We have detoured, but we have not drifted. The devil never drifts. The detour was necessary in order that you might be prepared to understand the most important part of this entire interview. Wow, so this book it's powerful. It's palpable. It's potent. It's brimming. It's brewing with sacred soulful elixirs of giant resurfaced regenerated ancient souls. We are now ready to get back to the discussion of the subject of adversity. Inasmuch as most adversities grow out of improper relationships between people, it seems important to understand how people may become properly related. Naturally, the question arises to what is a properly relationship between people? The answer is that the proper relationship is one that brings to all connected with it or affected by it some form of benefit. The proper relationship is the one that brings to all connected with it or affected by it some form of benefit. Take a moment to inventory your relationships at home, at work, and at play. Bite the bullet. That's some type of shadow work, right? Some type of fucking shadow. List the relationships that seem in need of improvement and keep them in your mind as you continue reading. So obviously, before even like seeing the quality of your relationships, most respectively energetically, the number one theme above all is truth. And if there is a lack of truth, then that is the essence of the quality of the relationship. How there's a drifting away from truth. So obviously take a moment to inventory your relationships, home, work, play. List the relationships that seem in need of improvement and keep them in your mind as you continue reading. So different forms of truth are needed to mend that shit. What then is an improper relationship? Any relationship between people which damages anyone or brings any form of misery or unhappiness to any of the individuals. How could improper relationships be corrected? By change of mind of the person causing the improper relationship, but they might not want to be changed, or by changing the persons to the relationship. Some minds harmonize naturally, while others just as naturally clash. Successful human relationships, to endure as such, must be formed of minds that naturally harmonize, quite aside from the question of having common interests as a means of bringing them to harmony. So that's something quote unquote hard to find. The natural harmonization of minds, right? It's there, but the general collective skewing layer of deception will prevent us from how some souls want to have a natural harmonic connection with like-minded people. There's a collective challenge, so I'm breaking it down. Number one, when you speak of business leaders who succeed because they know how to pick them, you might more correctly say they succeeded because they know how to associate minds which harmonize naturally. When you speak of business leaders who succeed because they know how to pick them, you might more correctly say they succeed because they know how to associate minds which harmonize naturally. So they're at the right place in the right time on fleeko, right? based on, just the God-given, leverage they have, right? Because to be a successful CEO, there has to be some type of inkling of, how you harmonize with people, right? Basically, right? Like, I don't know if any of, and me being a modest student, right? Like, a successful CEO perhaps knows how to just harmonize, knows like where to look for and how to harmonize with people, with themselves, perhaps. Knowing how to pick people successfully for any definite purpose in life is based upon the ability to recognize the types of people whose minds naturally harmonize. Remember, Hill's definition of the mastermind: harmonious coordination of two or more minds working to a definite end. So, Hill's definition of the mastermind. So, the mastermind, that was like, this is 1905 shit, right? Napoleon Hill, Hillstone, the Stone of Hill. The new transformation of spiritual harmony, right? That could be harmonized with the hill stone, respectively. Stay focused on adversity, if you will. If there are possible benefits to be found through adversity, name some of them. Adversity relieves people of vanity and egotism. It discourages selfishness by proving that no one can succeed without the cooperation of others. So that ego is a mother flipper. That shadow ego, whew, that shadow ego do not play. Adversity forces an individual to test his mental, physical, and spiritual strength. It thus brings him face to face with his weakness and gives him the opportunity to bridge them. So the enemies are paradoxically letting you refix your weakness. Adversity forces one to seek ways and means to definite ends by meditation and introspective thought. This often leads to the discovery and the use of the sixth sense through which one may communicate with infinite intelligence. And yeah, there, that, you know that that fourth dimension tip, you know, the third dimension self comes in and out of that, obviously, standardly. So I understand, like, what's happening, guys. This often leads to the discovery and the use of the sixth sense through which one may communicate with infinite intelligence. Adversity forces one to recognize the need for intelligence not available except from sources outside of one's own mind. Adversity breaks old habits of thought and gives one an opportunity to form new habits. Therefore, it may serve to break the hold of hypnotic rhythm and change its operation from negative to positive ends. What is the greatest benefit one may receive through adversity? The greatest benefit of adversity is that it may and generally does force one to change one's thought habits, thus breaking and redirecting the force of hypnotic rhythm. In other words, failure always is a blessing when it forces one to acquire knowledge or to build habits that lead to the achievement of one's major purpose in life. Is that correct? Yes, and something more. Failure is a blessing when it forces one to depend less upon material forces and more upon spiritual forces. Oh, holy fuck! Oh. Many human beings discover their other selves, the forces which operate through the power of thought, only after some catastrophe deprives them of the full and free use of their physical bodies. When a man can no longer use his hands and his feet, he usually begins to use his brain. Thus, he puts himself in the way of discovering the power of his own mind. The devil brings in the other self here, revealing how we could use our power of thought and our other selves to discover our true power and major purpose. So this guy, Napoleon Hill, this guy was a prodigy, dude, like in his own right. And one of the main keys I'm getting here is just like, seeing the karma, the good karma, to attempt to have a good relationship, to attempt to have good cooperation. That's what I'm getting with of of going through the failure, right? You gotta like have some good karma to get good cooperation. So that's what I'm getting with this whole failure thing. And it's funny because out of all the chapters I picked, I just chose 11, and they're speaking about one of the most crucial things of the path of the human, and the way of the hero, or the hero's way, or that hero's way naturally will encounter such of the nature. What benefits may be deprived from the loss of material things? Money, for example. The loss of material things may teach many needed lessons, none greater. However, than the truth that man has control over nothing and has no assurance of the permanent use of anything except his own power of thought. No permanent use of anything. Hi guys. How you guys doing? I wonder if this is not the greatest benefit of I wonder if this is not the greatest benefit available through adversity. I wonder if this is not the greatest benefit available through adversity. No, the greatest potential benefit of any circumstance which causes one to make a fresh start is that it provides an opportunity to break the grip of hypnotic rhythm and set up a new set of thought habits. New habits offer the only way out for people who fail. Most people who escape from the negative to the positive operation of the law of hypnotic rhythm do so only because of some form of adversity which forces them to change their thought habits. Thought habits. Isn't adversity apt to break one's self-reliance and cause one to give hope? Shout out to that Mercury field. Shout out to that Mercury tribe. Expressing and practicing dramatic, cinematic, theatrical Shakespeare plays. Shout out to that Mercury tribe, practicing theater. Isn't adversity apt to break one's self-reliance and cause one to give up hope? It has that effect on those whose willpower is weak through long established habits of drifting. Has the opposite effect of those who have not been weakened through drifting. The non-drifter meets with temporary defeat and failure, but his reaction to all forms of adversity is positive. And obviously, someone could obviously someone could try to find the science behind what I'm saying, but that's a different episode, right? That's a different episode, because obviously, someone could have a science background, and they could try to see how is this a quality webinar class episode, right? Well, it's seeing the challenges of life, of human life. He fights instead of giving up and usually wins. And the science behind the challenge of human life is spiritual, right? Spiritual consciousness, right? And the subtle collective subconsciousness interacting with the matrix and physical beings. So that's the esoteric science behind it, scientist. And you could detail your formulas thereof, obviously. So it's how is this a quality webinar, possible college class? Well, I just told you in the aforementioned sentence. Life gives no one immunity against adversity. The non-drifter meets with temporary defeat and failure, but his reaction to all forms of adversity is positive. He fights instead of giving up and usually wins. Life gives no one immunity against adversity, but life gives to everyone the power of positive thought, which is sufficient to master all circumstances of adversity and convert them into benefits. The individual is left with the privilege of using or neglecting to use his prerogative, I don't know if that's a typo. The individual is left with the privilege of the using or neglecting to use his prerogative right to think his way through all adversities. That's how it's spelled. Every individual is forced either to use his thought power for the attainment of definite positive ends, or by neglect or design use this power for the attainment of negative ends. There could be no compromise, no refusal to use the mind. The law of hypnotic rhythm forces every individual to give some degree of use, either negative or positive, to his mind, but it does not influence the individual as to which use he will make of his mind. Do you remember a time when you felt like giving up but didn't? My co author and I expand this concept in our book, 3 Feet from Gold, with stories of perseverance and never giving up from over 35 of today's top leaders, non drifters of our time. Am I to understand from what you say that every adversity is a blessing? No, I did not say that. So there's a discernment right there. There's a keen intellectual discernment right there. Am I to understand from what you say that every adversity is a blessing? No. Things are could be caused from distortion based, from whatever that means to you. No, I did not say that. I said there is the seed of an equivalent advantage in every adversity. I did not say that there was the full blown flower of advantage, just the seed. Usually, the seed consists of some form of knowledge, some idea or plan, or some opportunity which would not have been available except through the change of thought habits forced by the adversity. Are those all the benefits available to human beings through failure? No, failure is used by nature as a common language in which she chastises people when they neglect to adapt themselves to her laws. For example, the World War was man made and destructive. So it was man made. So it was ladder archons. Ladder archons. So the world wars that we have and the whatever you're calling the quote unquote elite are esoteric scientifically, they are latter archons. The fates are giving them the chance to fucking do their shit, right? They're free. They're just giving they gave the latter archons the floor, and they could represent the fates truly or not truly, or they could invert the fates, right? A Nana Venus could be inverted. A Nana Venus could have a shadow authentically or not authentically, right? And it's funny because in the etymology, other countries want to go against the U.S. dollar, and I'm not going to explain my bias thereof, but based on what I was taught, is the U.S. dollar is it's Isis, it's Venus, so and maybe that's too much truth for the web right now, but if the U.S. dollar, because obviously look at the S with two I's, that you take the I and typically I think originally it was two S's, but if you take the dollar sign and you spread it out, it spells ISIS, right? So I think going against the U.S. dollar, I think that's just it. Respectively, in my hypothetical theory, I think that might just be a facade. It might just be a play. It's like, but it could be more or less. It just depends on Venus. Depends on authentic Venus whether she wants to destroy and transform it or not, right? Because why would you guys go against authentic Venus when she's the one managing the fucking moon in one way? So like, yeah, and this is just a theory. So if you guys want to go against the U.S. dollar, which is Isis, which is Venus originally, and who knows if that's inverted or not, then why would you want to go against something that is managing, sexual energies, Venus? So that's just a theory. I'm not saying there's a bias whether I want to uplift or destroy the U.S. dollar economic, you know, trade currency affairs. I don't have a bias for that. I'm just trying to decode it with how the predecessors explained it to me from the etymology perspective, that the US dollar is Isis, which is Venus. And if you want to go against that, it might be a ploy, right? It might just be some fanciful narrative, or it might just be a inaccurate approach, right? A misunderstood approach, or it might be Venus herself trying to transform that. So I'm just sharing the hypotheticalism, because obviously the people who want to transform the US dollar, how are you doing it? Is it within the help of Venus, who's managing the sexual energies of the moon on the planet Venus, or not? So like, y'all are like, it's interesting that you guys are like, there's a lacking of intelligence on the planet. respectively. It's very interesting. Are those all the benefits available to human beings through failure? No. Failure is used by nature as common language in which she chastises people when they neglect to adapt themselves to her law. For example, the world war was man-made and destructive. Nature planted in the circumstances of the war the seed of an equivalent reprimand in the form of a world depression. The depression was inevitable and inescapable. And these fates, they're the fucking source of the science. They're the source of the fucking physics and the chemistry and the biology. Ooh. Am I to understand the law of hypnotic rhythm is the same as that which Ralph Waldo Emerson called the law of compensation? The depression was inevitable and inescapable. It followed the war as naturally as day follows night, and by the operation of the same law, the law of hypnotic rhythm. The law of hypnotic rhythm is the law of compensation. It is the power with which nature balances negative and positive forces throughout the universes, in all forms of energy, in all forms of matter, and in all human relationships. Last page of chapter 11. Has nature created the current economic turmoil to allow us once again to convert our own personal adversities into benefits? Does the law of hypnotic rhythm operate quickly in all instances? For example, does this law immediately bless one with benefits of positive application of thoughts or curse one immediately with the results of negative thoughts? The law operates definitely but not always swiftly. Both the benefits and the penalties incurred through the law by individuals may be harvested by others, either before or after their death. This is why your AI will lose. It doesn't have maximum accuracy with original law of the original fates, respectively. That's why your AI shall lose. Observe how the law operates definitely but not always swiftly. Both the benefits and the penalties incurred through the law by which individuals may be harvested by others, either before or after their death. Observe how this law works by forcing upon one generation of people. Observe how this law works by forcing upon one generation of people the effects of both the sins and the virtues of preceding generations. In the operation of all nature's laws, the fourth dimension, time, is an inexorable factor. And I think the fourth dimension weaves through other dimensions to slow down the final capping of time, right? And I'll explain gravity in a different video. The length of time consumed by nature in the relationship The length of time consumed by nature in the relation of effects to their cause depends in every instance on the circumstances at hand. The length of time consumed by nature in the relation of effects to their cause depends in every instance on the circumstances at hand. Nature grows a pumpkin in 3 months. A good-sized oak tree requires 100 years. She converts a hen's egg into a chicken in 4 weeks, but she requires 9 months to convert the egg of a human being into an individual. Life gives no one immunity against adversity, but life gives to everyone the power of positive thought, which is sufficient to master all circumstances of adversity and convert them into benefits. Has nature created the current economic turmoil to allow us once again to convert our own personal adversities into benefits? Woo! Okay, guys. 119.19. Oh god. So I'm just gonna I'm gonna pause. I'm gonna have some pause energy for about 20 seconds and see what comes in within the 20 seconds. Okay, that concludes the video. Thank you all for watching. I'll be back based on how I process this episode. And you know, um, every day we get better. Every day we get better, guys.